Hello Animorphs fans and welcome back to the Animorphs universe. We're looking at episode 5 of the Animorphs TV series today, and it's called Between Friends. This one is based entirely on the contents of Book 2, The Visitor. Why they changed the name, anybody's guess. This one has Rachel as the narrator, so previously we've had Jake, Marco and Jake Arco in the previous episode, which was a big disappointment. On the Run, episode 4, was bad. Does Between Friends rescue us from that pit of not very goodness and bring us back onto good form? The first thing I will say, and this isn't for this episode specifically, this is for all Animorphs episodes. One thing that I've realised I've had to do when I'm putting these videos together. So when I play clips, you'll see a starry background with a yellow box surrounding the episode. When I make that bit, I increase the exposure on the TV series, and I feel it looks a lot better, and I increase the saturation a bit. Because one thing I've noticed about the TV series is that it's very dark, and it's very desaturated for whatever reason, and I just feel it looks so much better if we just increase the exposure a bit. It really makes the colours pop a bit more. And we've got to remember this was a kids show, teenagers show more like, and they like colours. Ever watch something like Kenan and Kel or Saved by the Bell or, I don't know, Sabrina the Teenage Witch? A long time since I've seen that, but I'm imagining it follows the same trajectory. They're all full of colour. Obviously it takes it to extremes sometimes, for shows like iCarly and stuff like that, where they have a room and everything's like blue, orange, red, green, primary colours everywhere. And that's a bit ridiculous. You've got to find the middle ground. The Animorphs TV show is very grey and mauve and beige. It's not got much colour going on, not much contrast. So I think that's just something I want to put out there now, even though it's not directly to do with this episode specifically. But yeah, when you see the clips put on the screen here, I've upped the exposure. Okay, just so you're aware. So without further ado, let's get straight into Between Friends. In fact, let's get between friends. Let's get between the show and ourselves. The first thing we get in this episode is the director trying all his dirtiest tricks to try to add tension to this scene, including slow motion shots, camera pans, quick slices, reversals in time. Basically, he throws everything, even the kitchen sink, at this one. Does it work? No, it just looks a bit naff, really. Then you're constantly you know, just allow it to breathe. Sometimes the best way to add tension is just to not do anything. Just no music, just silence, and a character looking like what's going on. Sometimes that works a lot better than bang, boom, bing, reverse time, slow motion. Yeah, sometimes you just need to, less is more. Let's put it that way. Anyway, I've had enough of a go at the director so far. Rachel hears a bird of prey noise, so she's immediately suspicious. So she goes up to her window, looks outside, opens the door to its widest possible openness. She shouts hello into the darkness and then turns around. Now, I'm not sure about you, but I don't think that's exactly a great idea. If you're suspicious of somebody being outside of your window, you walk up to it. Sorry, I know my notes are probably glaring in the background. Sorry about that. You hear somebody outside, so you go over to your window, you open it as wide as you can open it, and then turn around. Yeah, sounds sensible, doesn't it? Sounds realistic as well. That's not what... You'd close the window, and you'd probably be a bit suspicious. You know, you'd probably keep your eye on it for a little bit. No, it's just open it wide, turn around. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, basically. Of course, it means that we get the shock turn that we see here, because drama. Sod realism, we need drama. And then, of course, who is it that flies into the window but that chum, our greatest buddy that we've known for approximately 5 minutes and who completely vanished on us, abandoned us at a time where probably abandoning us was very, very unwise. It's our buddy old pal Tobias.
It's okay, it's me.
Tobias.
This scene just makes it even clearer to us that Tobias is actually a dick. A classic dick. You know, it's the middle of the night, she's been asleep, and you're not even going to announce your presence before you come charging in, scaring her half to death, and then you're just like, hi Rachel, been a while. You give off major creep vibes, Tobias. That's, you know, if you did that today, you'd be arrested. I know you're a bird, so, you know, the chances of that are probably slimmer than normal. But that's like proper creeper behaviour. Just say to her before you come charging in, Rachel, it's me, I'm coming down. No, he just goes straight in there without a single word, frightens the life out of her. She could have had a heart attack. You know, add 70 years on her, she'd have keeled right over. You know, just think of these things, Tobias, knob. This part is an interesting change, because in the book series, it's Tobias telling Jake that he's been caught in this morph. But in this series, the TV series, he tells Rachel. This is... I'm okay with it. It has a different dynamic, okay? So we've already established that Tobias and Rachel like each other. In the book series, that didn't come till later on, but the TV series has already said, they're a couple, there you go, Nickelodeon audience, there's your romantic couple so far. You know, we're giving it to you straight away, no messing about. Whereas you didn't have that in the book series, and it was more appropriate for Tobias to go see Jake, because he was the narrator, and he's the leader. And this is his, not technically his failing, but he probably thinks of it as his failure as a leader, Tobias getting trapped in Morph. Obviously, we learned down the line that Tobias basically did it on purpose, book 43. But at this stage of the series, Jake is probably like, oh my god, this was my mess up, I'm the leader. This is where the big character growth happens. But what we learned from the TV series is that Jake as a leader is just sort of arbitrary. It doesn't really matter. And we see it later on in this episode as well, where he just doesn't show any, not even desire to be like a leader. He just doesn't have it. And it's more impactful for the TV series to see Tobias talk to Rachel, who is already established he's got the fees for. Okay? So I'm alright with this change. TV series, good job. Crack on. I'm okay with it. There are other things you've changed which are a disaster, but this one, you know, you can have that. Yeah. Tobias basically tells Rachel what he told Jake in the books then, which is that he'd overstayed his time in Morph and now he's trapped as a hawk. Rachel insists that he keep trying, but Tobias says that there is no hope. He is stuck as a bird forever. Something else I've noticed as well, and this is just a little thing. It's not a negative or a positive, it's just a thing I've noticed about the TV series. Have you listened to the audiobooks? Go listen to the audiobooks, if you haven't already. Do it. And notice how they pronounce Elfangor. How do I pronounce Elfangor? Elfangor. How does the TV series pronounce Elfangor? Elfangor. How do the audiobooks pronounce Elfangor? Elfangor. It's like they're Welsh. Oh, there's the old chappy Elfangor. I don't know why the audiobooks decided to change the pronunciation. They put more emphasis on the last syllable rather than the first syllable. So Elfangor or Elfangor. Yeah, I'm just saying. I'm just thinking out loud. You know, let's crack on. I've dilly-dallied enough in this first scene. We get through the intro sequence and we arrive at the school with Rachel, who does her inner monologuing. The focus of the monologuing is actually about Tobias. This is understandable because they've spent the first couple of minutes talking about the whole Tobias thing, whereas in the books it was at the end of book 1. So they've started with that, and now they have to link it into the episode. So Rachel walks into the school, has her inner monologue, and then there's this really weird line of, we have to help him. Which I get, but it's just, the context for this line is weird.
We have to help him.
He's already told you that he can't be helped. And we know that from what we've been told. And he doesn't get helped by the Animorphs for the rest of the series. So this line here, Rachel thinking, we have to help him, it's just weirdly placed. It doesn't seem to fit. But it's nitpicky, isn't it? Notice how most of the criticisms so far have been very nitpicky. It doesn't stay that way forever, but, you know, we're on good form. You know, if all I'm getting is little bits like, oh, that line didn't sound entirely in place, then we're on, you know, we're on for a good episode so far. Jake and Marco appear, and they have another little discussion about Tobias, and they decide to discuss it later at the barn, because, and quite rightly, they say that it's not the right place to talk about it, which I like. I like how the show is aware of that, and they actually do something about it now. You know, that feels Animorphs-y. And the TV series doesn't manage that all the time, but when it does it, you know, it's a really nice feeling of, that's the sort of thing the Animorphs would have done. We brought it up, but then we say, hold on a minute, let's just discuss this back at the barn, keep it stum, and then they go their separate ways. That's very Animorphs-y, so I appreciate that. Anyway, Rachel finds Melissa, who we first met in the previous episode, and we went to the sharing with her. So now we start to really get into the depths of the visitor storyline, the book 2 storyline. We then immediately fall into one of the worst lines of the show so far.
How's your dad? Hello, he's our principal. You see him every day.
Put it this way, okay? So I've come up to you, and I say, I don't know, hi, Derek. How's your father? And you say, well, he is a plumber. Okay. I repeat, how's your father? He's a plumber. You see, hello, he's our principal. You see him every day. No, we don't see her every day, Melissa. He died, remember, back in episode 3. Also, that's very insensitive, Rachel. You know that her dad just died, didn't he?
You have failed once again.
I mean, it certainly felt that way, didn't it? And we discussed that back in episode 3, that Chapman very clearly was exterminated by Visser 3. And now she comes up to Melissa the next day. How's your dad doing? Has he still got his head? But yeah, what a stupid line from Melissa there, and delivered so poorly as well. Hello, expositional dialogue. Get over it. Come on, behave. Also, is that something a daughter would say about their parents? You know, does Melissa just think that her dad is the role he plays? He doesn't have feelings, Rachel. He's the principal. Didn't you know that teachers don't have feelings? I'm hip and trendy and down with the kids, says Mr. Producer. No, he's just his role. He's just a principal. He does principal-y things. What are you, stupid? Other than that, Melissa's actor does a relatively good job. If you just take out that first line she said there, she does absolutely fine. And plays the role actually quite well of a concerned child who's worried that something's going on with her parents. We then come to the barn for what is largely a good barn scene, but there is one major issue.
We have to do something.
I don't think we should do anything right now.
Why not?
We've had way too many close calls.
Remember that we're at the stage where we're trying to build these characters, and largely build them based on what their book counterparts were like. So Jake's first line being, I don't think we should do anything right now. There's been too many close calls, we shouldn't be doing anything. That's a Marco line. Like, I look at that and think that is definitely something that Marco would say. Jake later comes back and says, no, we need a plan first, which is more like him, but Marco, in this scene, has none of his Marco lines. He has a couple of jokes which are Marco lines, but I'm talking specifically about what he was like prior to Book 5 Marco, because that was a big part of his character. A major part of his character, actually. That was like the biggest part of his thing in the first 5 books was, I don't think we should be doing this. We should be laying low. We shouldn't be getting involved in this. That should have been Marco's line, and it would have made a massive difference. It seems like a small thing on the surface. And that's a big thing about this episode. On the surface, it largely seems fine. There don't seem to be any major issues. But if you actually delve deeper into the long-lasting effects of this episode, then the problems do start to show. The character development is mixed up. And when you mix up the character development, especially this early on, it becomes much more difficult down the line to establish who these characters are, what their arc is. So Jake stealing Marco's lines at the start, 4 or 5 episodes in, is actually a big deal, I think. That should have been Marco's line. Spoiler alert for later down the line, once we get to about episode 15, Marco suddenly starts putting on this, damn, this Animorphs thing is above our pay grade, you know, we shouldn't be doing this, we should be lying low. But that foundation needed to be built about here. This is where it should have been built, but we don't get that. Marco now is just along for the ride, he's just a joke machine in the series from this point on. Until that point where suddenly he's back into book 5, Marco, and he's like, I don't think we should be doing this Yerk thing. And when we come to that, I'm sure it will feel very out of place. This is where that foundation should have been laid. Right here with that line. And they should have built on that, but alas, they did not. A big failure there. Apart from that, this barn scene is well directed. There's some good lines in there. Even though Marco didn't get the line he needed, he did get a couple of jokey Marco lines, which went very well. And Rachel is showing a little bit of assertiveness, sort of. They're trying to give her a character. But ultimately failing. Spoiler alert for the end of this video. Yeah, so a barn scene with mixed feelings. So let's move on to the next scene. We come to the Chapman household, where Mr. Chapman and his daughter, Melissa, are having their din-dins. They eat their dinner in silence, and we'll notice that Mrs. Chapman is absent. It's not like she doesn't exist in this universe. Chapman actually says a line that indicates that Mrs. Chapman is currently just away.
From now on, whenever your mother's away, you're the substitute chef.
The lack of a Mrs. Chapman, I get it. And obviously there's a lack of budget in this show, so saving on an actor who plays a bit part is probably beneficial in a lot of ways. But there is a part with Mrs. Chapman that does become relevant, and I think we miss something because of her absence, and we will cover that as we progress. But for now, we know that Melissa and her dad, Hedrick Chapman, the principal, they are sitting for dinner, and Mrs. Chapman is absent. Okay? There's also something tangential I want to point out here, and I'm basing it on this. So, Americans, right? Americans. We've got here steak, mashed taters, carrots and peas, okay? And if you watch Chapman here, he takes the steak and he plops it in his mouth, okay? What's the deal, Adam? Why are you bringing that up? Okay, how would you eat food, right? What's all this here? What's all that? What's all that? There's a variety of flavours, okay? The steak, once you've got to... Come on, chappers. Oh, come on. Once you got to this stage where you've sliced it up and you've got all that space there on the back of the fork, back of the food, you put some mash on it. Don't just eat the steak on its own. And then, like when you got the mash, dip that into your peas and then maybe stab a bit further and get a carrot. Get the full body of flavour from the meal. Why am I chastising you Americans about this now? Because I've married an American, I've been to America, and I see how you eat, and this is the norm, from what I've seen, where you don't mix your ingredients. And you all go around saying, oh, yeehaw, the Brits' food is all so boring and don't have no sugar or cheese on it. It got no flavour. Well, no wonder. If you sit there eating part of a single flavour of a meal at a time, why do you do that? Why do you not mix the ingredients? That's the whole point of it all being on the same plate. What is wrong with you? Look, I'm looking at that thinking, my God, where's the mash on that fork? He's surely not going to put that straight in his mouth. Oh, sacrilege. You can't be doing that. Stop it. On a serious note, like, you always say that British food is bland. Well, you only think that because you don't eat it correctly. You got to mix it up. That's the whole point of a meal, that you put multiple food items on your fork or spoon or whatever you're doing at a time. And then you get that mix. I mean, I know what you Americans do. You just say, oh, look, there's a bit of food. I'm going to get the salt and the sugar and the cheese and... flavour. Yeah, I get it. You're going to get a lot of flavour from that. It's just freaking salt, sugar and cheese. This has been another anti-American rant from a British person. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Basically, TLDR, or TLDW, too long didn't watch. Just making a TLDR far longer than it needs to be. That's the whole point, Adam. Oh, another thing as well. You use the side of your forks to cut things. That's what the freaking knife is for. Like, we'll be eating dinner around, like, my parents' house or whatever. And we're all there with our knives and forks, you know, doing it properly. And there's my wife with the side of a fork jamming the freaking food to split it in half. You're like, are you savages? Are you actually savages? Oh, dear. You Americans are a funny bunch, aren't you? You know, you're basically the you're the special brother. You're the weird one of the litter. You're the one that the parents sort of look at and think, what the hell happened to you? You got no class. No class. Anyway, I'm really have you noticed that I'm enjoying ranting about America right now? I am doing it deliberately to get a rise out of you. But my points do stand, right? So, Chapman, now that you're eating your dinner incorrectly, let's move on. In fact, no, there's something else we've got to mention about the dinner. We're given the impression that Melissa is looking at her father and thinking that he's off. His character isn't acting right. He's not acting like a genuine human being. But can you blame him? Okay? Look at this meal. Look at this man. Look at this meal. Where's the gravy? There's like a small splash on the mashed potato. There's the little tiny... Why are you holding back on the gravy, Melissa? Why do you think he doesn't look genuine in praising her food and saying, it's both satisfying and delicious? Just watch this scene back again and then don't think yerk, you know, clear your mind, don't think yerk, think Chapman just doesn't like the food and he's trying to not make Melissa feel bad. Just think of that being the situation and watch it back.
Is your dinner okay?
It's both satisfying and delicious. From now on, whenever your mother's away, you're the substitute chef.
It makes perfect sense. Melissa, there's nothing wrong with your dad. You're just a rubbish cook. Look at you put no gravy on it. Of course he's going to think it's an awful... His mouth is dry enough as it is. It's just bone now. You've melted away the gums. It's so dry. Anyway, yes, that is enough of the food now, but I just thought it was such a major part of the plot that we needed to talk about it a lot. Anyway, Rachel comes up to the Chapman house. We get an utterly pointless moment where she drops something and Chapman looks out the window to look for her. At least he didn't open the freaking window as wide as it will go and then turn his back. At least he didn't do that. Ain't that right, Rachel? Anyway, that wastes a few seconds and adds a bit of false drama. And then we can actually get on with the plot. Rachel approaches the door. I assume the back door of the house. It looks like a back door. And she pulls out a tin of tuna.
Come on, free dinner. Come on, it's tuna. Dolphin friendly and everything.
What is that, Rachel? It's like a freaking Looney Tunes cartoon, isn't it? Wafting the smell. You're about a freaking meter, half a meter. Your hand is from the door and you're just going, it's dolphin friendly. Waft it in. So stupid. In the book, you have the whole part where Tobias basically grabs hold of Fluffer and brings him down, and he's scratching everyone. But obviously the TV series couldn't have that because you wouldn't want to rile a cat up on screen. I mean, you could... No, just get a picture of a cat sort of running off and the sound of "row" and scratch and Marco going "ah," and put some fake blood on him. You know, do that rather than this nonsense. It's dolphin friendly. Sod off. And who's to say Chapman's not on the other side of that door? I mean, maybe Rachel still thinks he's dead. I mean, it sure looked like he died.
You have failed once again.
But no, he is still alive. Just so we're aware now. We've seen him now. Unless it's a clone, which would explain actually why he's been acting weirdly. Have you never thought of that in the TV series? You know, a couple episodes after he very clearly died, Melissa thinks he's not acting right. There's something wrong with him, almost like he's a clone. Or maybe the Chi have, like, done a... I don't know. That's the new headcanon. Anyway, the plan somehow works, and Fluffer comes right outside to get the tuna, and Rachel grabs and acquires him. And then Jake appears. Just as Rachel is acquiring and about to morph Fluffer, Jake appears, coming along to see her. And he tries to call out, but is immediately stopped from calling out when Rachel begins to morph. Then, instead of actually, you know, "Psst, Rachel, over here, it's me, Jake." Instead of doing something like that, he just looks down sadly and solemnly sighs. Great leadership, Jake. Oh, disobeyed again. Have some balls, Jake. I mean, I know it's only like early in the series, but even in the book series, Jake had a lot more about him than that. You know, he actually laid into Rachel when she just disobeyed him. Okay, he actually went in there. Here he's just, yeah, rubbish. We then come to one of the most memeable moments of the TV series, and I have actually made some memes out of it.
Cat. That cat is a nuisance.
But I thought you loved him.
Well, now I don't.
It's just that face. Well, now I don't. And so I've got a couple of memes that I've made. Feel free to use this template. Basically, just... Actually, no, I'm not going to explain it because I'll just ruin it. I mean, it should be pretty obvious what's going on from the memes you see here, so... If there are any more memeable moments happen, I'll be sure to do something with it. But, yeah, I like that one. Well, now I don't. Rachel makes her way down to the basement and starts looking through Chapman's tools in the basement. This is where the TV series decides to rely on the book where it ought not to. Why do I say that? Well, ask yourself the question. Why is Rachel rummaging through his collection of DeWalt drill bits? Why is she doing that? What context has the show given us? The context that the show has given us is that Chapman is a controller and Melissa is concerned that he's acting strangely. Of course, that naturally leads Rachel to the basement and his toolkit. Why? It doesn't, does it? In the book, she had a reason to go to the basement, and that reason was as follows. She followed Chapman. She looked up at Chapman and saw that he went to the basement, so as a cat, she followed him, because that's impulsive Rachel. That's her character. That's what she does. She doesn't really care much for the risks. She sees Chapman going that way, so she thinks, I'm going to follow to see what he's doing. But of course, Rachel doesn't have character in the TV series. Remember, we're talking about Casachely. You might as well have Cassie in this. This might as well be Cassie rummaging through Chapman's DeWalt drills. Honest to God. Now, and what I mean by relying on the books too much is because the book, they looked at the book and said, right, so she ends up in the basement, so we'll just have a go look in the basement. You need to actually give a reason for her to go to the basement. Surely, you know, if the first thought, the only thought on Rachel's head is Chapman is a controller, where would you head? You might head to the bedroom. You might see if he's got a study somewhere. I mean, maybe you'd head down to the basement, but that would be like, it wouldn't be your top choice, surely. Nor would you go rummaging through toolkits. What are you looking for? What are you doing, Rachel? Chapman immediately develops a sixth sense and actually just drops his cutlery onto the plate. Now is the time to go see the Visser. Poof! And walks off. How has he know? What is... I don't get it, I don't. We have a few more moments of Chapman acting weird around his daughter, which... it doesn't need to be there, but it doesn't really harm the episode either. Honestly, there's much more things that harm the episode than this scene does. For example, building dramatic tension by having him look at himself in a mirror, because that's what you do when you walk into the garage casually. All for dramatic tension, yes. We've already had like 5 moments of dramatic tension and they've all been entirely misplaced. Remember, this is Animorphs. You've got loads of opportunities for dramatic tension. And yet the TV show always seems to want to do it where it doesn't need to be. It puts all the dramatic tension in the wrong place. Chapman's walking to the basement while Rachel's not in Morph. You know, it doesn't need to be there. It doesn't need to happen. You have plenty more moments of tension that you could have exploited here. But you chose Tobias coming into the window to be a point of tension. Chapman zombie walking to the basement, turning to look in a mirror. That sort of thing. Rachel knocking over the screwdriver outside and Chapman looking outside the window. Look, these moments didn't need to happen, and you could have done so much more with that extra minute or two that you had spare if you just took all that rubbish out. Okay? I'm talking to directors who were active 20 years ago. What am I doing? There's a couple other times where Chapman stops as well, and it's very annoying that this process of him walking from the kitchen to the basement, he actually does walk like a zombie, just very slow, ponderous. But we've seen him walking before and he's been absolutely fine. He walks absolutely fine. So why, when he's in his own house, does he give it that whole controller walk? Controls don't walk like that. And just to put it into perspective, look, he's about, what? You'd probably say about 5-6 steps away from being on the steps that lead there. And Rachel has enough time to morph. That's either really rapid speed morphing, or Chapman is just walking at the speed of a snail. It's one of the two. It might be a combination, actually. He then says cat as if he was Draco Malfoy talking about Harry Potter.
Cat.
Potter.
And then he finds his secret lair, which was a bit more difficult to get into in the book series, but here in the TV series, it takes a slight bump on the door. That's brilliant security, isn't it? You know, if you don't want your daughter to find anything. Yeah, sure, she's not likely to go and look at your... I mean, there's a broom. There is a broom on the door. Surely she has chores around the house. And if she just put that broom on slightly too hard onto the door, she's got access to a secret Yerk lair. Look at... hello again to you. I'm trying to get on this one, actually. Look at this thing. There's a broom. And he just lightly knocks on the door. It's just... and there's the secret Visser 3 room. Put a lock on it. Is it really that much of a budget issue to just get like a lock mechanism that you can just pretend to unlock? Or something like that? Oh my god. Or even just get a TV remote. You use freaking flashlights for Dracon beams. Get a TV remote and make it look like you had a freaking DJ mixing desk as a bug fighter interface later on in the series. Spoiler alert. You can get away with a TV remote on the side of the door, you press a couple of buttons and the door opens. It's much more convincing than... And the door opens, isn't it? My god, director. Common sense, please! Fluffer has re-entered the building, and both Fluffer and Rachel run into the secret lair that Hedrick Chapman has opened. I do like this bit of alien technology that Chapman has. It looks like it should put a hologram right in front of him, but then it throws the hologram in front. And I actually do appreciate that bit of alien technology. I like that. It looks good. Chapman explains to the Visser that he is late because his daughter was suspicious.
You're late.
My apologies, Visser.
My host's daughter was suspicious.
Is that really your excuse? When you got the sixth sense and you went, cutlery down on the plate, and you got up and zombie walked. It took you about 5 minutes to get to the basement. Maybe if you actually walked like a normal human being, you'd have gotten there on time and the Visser wouldn't have accused you of being late now, would he? You didn't need to look in the mirror and then just abruptly stop in the hallway to, I don't know, meditate. I don't know what you were doing. What do you mean the daughter was suspicious? You were eating dinner. You stopped in the middle of dinner to walk off. What do you mean your daughter was suspicious? How did that affect you in any way? Make it make sense, show. I mean, it's all right, Visser 3 saying, oh, you're late, and then him giving the excuse, but it needs to actually be seen. You need to show us that the reason for him being late, because you haven't really given us a valid reason for him being late. He just put his dinner plate... He just stopped halfway through dinner, answered a couple of questions from his daughter, and then slowly walked to the basement, and he's accused of being late. Give us something, or just don't put that comment in there. Don't put the whole you're late thing in there if you can't justify it on the screen. Okay? Easy.
The homing device operation was a fiasco. Our scientists have failed to unlock the disk.
Of course it was a failure. A 3-year-old could have outsmarted you on the tracking device, and who cares about the Andalite disk? Why are you trying to get in it? What's so important about it? We're not told, and frankly when we do get told, it's very, very confusing. Visser 3 does sort of explain what their thinking is here.
I want those Andalite bandits caught and the secret to that disk extracted from them.
By saying that he doesn't know what's on this disk, so he wants the Andalite bandits so that they can be made to unlock the secrets of the disk. And as much as that's an explanation as to why, it just seems like you've undercomplicated it. There's another reason why he wants the Andalite bandits. It's because they're a danger to his invasion on Earth. You know, it's that simple. You don't need to add this whole... Well, what we actually need the Andalite bandits for is because we don't know what's on this MacGuffin item, and we need the Andalites to tell us. No, just them being a danger to his invasion is enough of a motivation. Is it not? No, the showrunners just seem to think, it's not enough. It's not enough. We need to have another bigger reason for the Visser to want to capture the Andalite bandits. I know, we'll have this disc. This thing that just looks like a floppy disk, basically, for the Yeerks. And they're desperate to know what's on the disc. Why? Because they must know. They must know. It might be porn for all they care, but they don't care. They want to get on and see what's on this small disc thing that they found in the... Put it this way. Where do the Yeerks find the disc? Jake had it in his pocket, and they went down to the Yeerk pool, and he must have dropped it somewhere. So the Yeerks have just found this disc in the Yeerk pool. What are your first thoughts going to be? Oh, the Andalites dropped this item in the Yeerk pool. Is your first thought going to be, this has got to contain such massive secrets that we need to capture these people and we need to open this disc? Or are you just going to think, it probably is just useless information that we can just discard? Because they thought that it was enough of a risk to bring it down to the Yeerk pool and risk dropping it, you know. What are they going to think? You know, the show's just not justifying these steps. It's just foisting them upon you and expecting you to just go along with it. It's crap. Chapman then steps on the cat's tail. We don't know which cat it is, but we know it's one of them, and we get the stock cat noise to explain that the cat is well, they're made aware of the cat's presence. The cat that was stood on, we assume, is the one that arrives here. So watch as it comes up onto that cinder block there. So we're assuming that's the one that was just stood on. The one that was stood by Chapman's feet, which in the book is Rachel. Okay, so that one we assume is Rachel on the left here, and this one we assume is Fluffer. But that's wrong for a couple of reasons. Firstly, as we go down the line, Chapman takes that one. And it turned out to be Rachel, so it's definitely that one. So why would that one be stored? I don't know. But also, why would Rachel have gone to stand next to the other cat? You should think, surely, I don't want to be seen next to the other version of Fluffer. So yeah, that one is definitely Fluffer that was hiding by Chapman's feet. So Rachel was just stood off to the side on a cinder block, whereas in the book she's hiding under the desk so that she can't be seen. I get the feeling that the show writers just wanted to swap it for... I don't know what they were doing, honestly. I've confused myself even. Visser 3 orders Chapman to...
Bring them both to me.
Shock horror, so Chapman's going to take both of these cats, and it doesn't matter, because whichever one's which, Chapman's going to take them both. Chapman then slowly walks toward both the cats, and the one on the right, so that the one that wasn't under the desk, the one that's just standing at the side, runs off. And Chapman grabs the cat, and Visser 3 says, "That's the one! That's the cat we're after! Bring it to me!" But you just said bring them both. And now you're just saying, that one moved, therefore the guilty one, bring only that one. And so, thusly, Chapman only brings the one. You do realise that cats have legs. And that sometimes they move. I own 4 cats. Sometimes I will walk up to one and it will just get off the place it's standing and walk somewhere else. Sometimes it won't. So, you know, so neither one of them thinks it might have... Look, it just steps. It just steps off the cylinder. Just because you add stock cat noises every 2 seconds. By the way, that really ruins the atmosphere. Just look at this.
Come on. That's it.
Yes, that's the one. Get it.
Gotcha.
I didn't add those noises. They just think we need to establish every 2 seconds that there is still a cat present in this scene. So just take the most stock noises of cats and throw them all in there, even if they really don't seem in the right place. You don't need to. We don't need we don't need reminding every 2 seconds that there's a cat in the scene. Chapman places Rachel into a box. He doesn't receive any injuries like he does in the book. We don't get that drama. We don't get the scene with Mrs. Chapman and Hedrick Chapman rebelling against the Yerks. Visser 3 has told Chapman to bring Melissa, and we don't get the scene of him not bringing Melissa. He just goes to his car and drives off. And then, of course, Jake decides to morph in the middle of a street. Not only does he morph in the middle of a street, he goes from a hiding place where he's hidden, runs into the middle of the street, and then morphs. That's twice he's done that in 2 episodes. Jake then gives chase in dog morph, and they find themselves at a brand new location. Visser 3's mansion, I think. So halfway through the episode now, and we have missed a few scenes. So if you remember Book 2, The Visitor, Rachel had gone into Chapman's house twice at this point. And the first time she went in, she disobeyed Jake and stayed in longer to comfort Melissa, who was crying in her bed, and Rachel went up as Fluffer to help comfort the girl. And then the next time she went into the basement and hid under Chapman's desk again, because she'd done that the first time. And Jake was a flea on her back. Hence why he ended up going with her at this particular bit. But Chapman steps on Rachel's tail, or kicks Rachel, I believe, and draws the attention to Visser 3, and Visser 3 eventually says, "Bring that cat," after she basically scratches all over Chapman, which is a bit more of a clue than just stepping off a block. But then there's 2 scenes that we're missing here. The one with Mrs. Chapman, where Chapman and Mrs. Chapman rebel against their Yerks at the fort that Visser 3 told Chapman to bring their daughter. And that's when they have their discussion where they say, okay, we're not going to bring our daughter. We then get the bit where Fluffer's in the cage and Chapman is walking to his car and Melissa comes up chasing. What are you doing with Fluffer? What are you doing with Fluffer? And Chapman basically just says, this is another cat, or something along those lines. But he actually lied to her. He said something like, I'm taking Fluffer somewhere. And then Melissa sees the real Fluffer. run in, and she's like, why did you lie to me? And it was just a very good little bit, but this TV episode, and I know it has to be narrowed down to 20 minutes, just does away with that. But take away the dramatic tension moments that have probably added up to about 1.5 minutes overall in this episode that didn't need to be there. Take them out and put at least one of those 2 important scenes in here. Build the character. You don't need the tension. I'd rather, you know what I'm like, I'd rather have the character stuff in there. And I think it would be a much bigger benefit to the series, okay? Because Melissa's just nothing really now. We don't get that same emotional thing going on. We didn't get the scene of Rachel comforting her as a cat, which is tremendously important for her development, I believe. We just don't get it. It just doesn't happen. And so we're immediately transported to this scene. We will talk more about this at the end. It largely comes down to fitting a whole episode into 20 minutes. But yeah, we will discuss that later on. I'm going to take a quick break now, get myself a coffee and whatever have you. And then we'll come back, or I'll come back, and we'll discuss the mansion scene. Chapman approaches what we can only imagine is Visser 3's mansion that he stole from his host, Victor Trent. He comes up to some sort of security panel and types in a code. Now, those paying close attention will see that the code he types in is 226. That, coincidentally, is his Yerk number. So, it's a strange security system, but I suppose you just key in your name. But then it does this wacky thing. This thing that looks like, what's that movie called? I don't think I've actually ever seen the movie. Q Raptor laughing and Geek Truth in the background. The movie with the circle with the red dot that says, I can't do that, Dave, or whatever it is. But that thing shoots a laser into Chapman's head and finds that there is a Yerk. Now, obviously, in the book series, the Yerk sort of spreads itself over your brain. In the TV show, it's just there, just awkwardly sitting at the side of the brain. But whatever, that's just me being nitpicky. That's not a problem. But this thing lets Chapman into this mansion. Jake arrives just a moment too late, so he can't get into the facility. And then for the first time, and probably last in the entire show, we see 2 Hawk-Bajir. 2 whole Hawk-Bajir. Would you Adam and Eve it? 2 of them. Obviously, it's probably green. Well, it is green screened, let's be honest. And so it's basically the same suit. Stood in 2 different places, awkwardly, sort of moving Five Nights at Freddy's style, like animatronic things. They just look crap, don't they? And as we'll ask the question later, why are they even there? Also, how does nobody see or hear them? Because they're doing their... in the book series, they'll talk. In the TV show, they just go... And they're just stood on top of these pillars like gargoyles. Nobody sees them driving past. I mean, maybe they're hidden by trees, but we don't know, really. Honestly, they shouldn't even be there, because they don't do anything. Jake decides that he can get into the facility, he just needs to dig under the fence, which obviously puts a time limit on him. Meanwhile, Chapman parks up. The Hawk-Bajir are clearly a looming threat, but never mind Chapman, they'll disappear within about 5 seconds and you'll never see them again. Now let's talk about the mansion itself. In the book, The Visitor, of course, Chapman travels back to the construction site where we were back in book 1 and obviously the first couple of episodes of the series, which meant that the Visser had to come down in his ship again and time pressure on him there. But the TV show didn't want to do that, probably because of budget. They didn't want another scene with fighters landing, even though they probably could have reused footage. I mean, they do it all the time, so why the hell not? But the idea of this mansion that belongs to Victor Trent is both filled with plenty of potential and also plenty of bad potential. If we ever saw it again. It would have been a really cool setting, unique to the TV series, if we had Victor Trent's mansion where, you know, instead of maybe the yurt pool all the time, sometimes they have to get into the mansion. On the negative side, though, it does mean that to some degree the Visser is staying at that place rather than in the book series where it's either the yurt pool or up in orbit where he's very, very hard to get to. A mansion is a bit easier to get a hold of, you know, just fly over the fence and you're in, basically, so it causes problems there. This, of course, assumes that the mansion will ever appear again, which, funnily enough, it doesn't. Not as far as I'm concerned, it never appears again, so wasted potential in either direction, honestly, which is a shame. It would have been nice, you know, to have established this setting, to have it appear more, but yeah, just never get seen again. Chapman wanders through the grounds of, I mean, I think it's a mansion. You never actually see a building, but it's got statues everywhere, so definitely not a cemetery. Visser 3 does this really weird thing where he's almost looking at Chapman from behind the bushes in a very secretive way, which obviously is really not very Visser 3. When has he ever been known to sort of, oh, where's he going? No, he just steps out and says, "Oi!" But then, never mind, because it must be a different Visser 3, because then he turns out to be in front of Chapman all along. Chapman walks past the bush where Visser 3 is hiding, and then suddenly he's confronted by Visser 3. So, what, did Visser 3 just run ahead very quickly off screen? Now, this is something that they get right in this episode, the intimidation factor. Visser 3 here, and by extension his host Victor Trent, are very intimidating, and it is very, very well done. This is what the episode does best. Then Jake walks in as a dog and, for whatever reason, demorphs. Why would you do that, Jake? Why would you demorph? What advantage has that given you? You've got better smell and ears with the dog, so stay in morph. You can hear what's going on. Maybe you can't see better, but they were lit up quite brightly. Just stay in dog morph. You don't need to demorph. I know the budget means you can't just, you know, CGI a dog paying attention in there. It's a bit harder than that to keep a real dog attentive, but it can't be that hard, surely. Not only that, but it seems to pose a pretty substantial security risk if you are spotted as yourself rather than a dog. Visser 3 then proceeds to talk to what he assumes is the Andalite bandit in this cage, and he says the following line.
My appearance disturbs you.
Now surely that would be a reason for him to stay in his normal body, because Visser 3 likes to disturb his enemies, but no, it's almost, he's saying, I'm disturbing you, it's okay, I'm going to change to human, a little less disturbing. Again, it just doesn't seem very in character for Visser 3. So it is nitpicky though, and there's the obvious reason of budget. You know, as much as we like seeing him in this suit, there's only so much it can do and so much it can express, so he has to turn into his human form, Victor Trent. And I believe, yes, this is the first time we see Victor Trent. And yeah, we can assume these are his lands, because Visser 3 says,
An inferior form, this Victor Trent, but the man's wealth and power makes him a useful tool.
So now we've established that Visser 3's host body is wealthy and powerful and has its benefits. That's that exposition out of the way. Visser 3 then takes what he assumes to be the Andalite bandit out of this cage and says to her, you have this choice.
Save yourself some pain, Andalite. Return to your real form and we shall get on with your infestation. Your Andalite pride is as absurd as the shape you're in. Well, your 2-hour time limit must almost be up. You're no good to anyone as a cat. I shall wait 1 hour, then I'll have you destroyed. Slowly.
Full credit to the actor Eugene Lipinski for the delivery of this line. Mwah, chef's kiss. Oh, slowly. He does that so well, and there are a couple of times in here where his delivery is incredible, and we do get one of the best lines in the series here, and we will come to that. But it's a great introduction to Visser 3's host, and it goes so swimmingly. Then, of course, he tells his controllers to
Take him away.
What you'd assume from that, when he says, take the Andalite away, he means to his controllers, his subordinates, take this Andalite and put it in a secure location where there's no chance of escape, and let it out the cage so that it's able to attempt to demorph if it were to choose to, because that was the whole point. I said, return to your form so we can infest you, and if you don't, we'll kill you. So there's your choice. Go controllers, put the Andalite into this secure room somewhere and observe it to see if it demorphs, and then tell me. That's what you'd think he means. This is what he actually means, apparently. You there, controller, place the Andalite bandit on top of a plinth with light shining upon it. Do not tie the box down or anything like that, and then walk away without even turning back to look at it. Just leave it where we can't see it. That's definitely what Visser 3 meant by take him away. Just leave the Andalite bandit there. Well done. Visser 3 and Chapman then discuss Melissa. And this is where we get, I believe, the greatest line of the Animorphs TV series.
Bring me the girl! You're starting to bore me, Innis 226. And let me tell you this. If you don't like me when I'm angry, you're going to hate me when I'm bored.
Oh, Lila, wasn't that just the most... that wasn't... It's very good. It's a very good line, and delivered impeccably by Eugene Lipinski. Well done for that. And then, of course, it's immediately ruined, the tone gone, because this intimidating Eugene Lipinski, Visser 3, is knocked over by a dog. Nobody saw the dog coming, by the way.
It's another Andalite!
Did nobody think to, you know, shout, dog incoming, or something like that? Maybe they just didn't want to disturb Visser 3, but, you know, if he gets knocked over by a dog, you're probably more in danger than if you stopped him from being pushed over by a dog, honestly. I think even psychopathic Visser 3 would be able to tell the difference there. Jake has apparently remorphed to Homer, making his whole demorphing sequence earlier completely redundant. And he pushes Visser 3 over, and then runs through the controllers, who have invented a whole new dance move, apparently. This dance move just sort of being... It's like the crab, isn't it? But they're all doing that. And not one of them thinks Dracon Beam, boom, or grab, or tackle. No, it's just... it's a bit of that going on. Unfortunately, Jake's attempts are thwarted, and he's captured eventually by those controllers. But then, instead of concentrating on this apparent influx of Andalites coming into his mansion grounds, he just immediately turns back to Chapman and asks about the girl again.
Now, 226, I've had enough of your foolishness. Where is she? Where is the girl?
There's no alertness here. You know, an Andalite's just come up and barged him in the back, and he's just like, that must be all of them. I know when we were in the Earthpool the other day, there was like a tiger, a bird, all sorts of Andalite stuff going on. But rest assured, this time it's just the one. It's just the one coming to the rescue of the one in the cage, so we can go back to concentrating on the girl. You know, get your priorities right, gang. I mean, why not demorph at this stage? You know that there's probably going to be more Andalite bandits coming. Of course, we know that there aren't, but in his position, surely he's feeling vulnerable. Demorph, go back to your Andalite form, or at the very least, go find those two Hawk-Bajir we saw earlier and get them involved. But no, we get none of that. They just show absolutely no alertness to the situation. Jake is tied down via quite a substantial rope, while Visser 3, back onto the topic of Melissa, goes to search Chapman's car and finds that he has not, in fact, brought her along. Eugene Lipinski does some excellent acting. And then there's the confrontation between him and Chapman regarding the deal that he made. Chapman mentions to Visser 3 that he had a deal with this human, to which the Visser responds,
What? You struck a deal with one of these primate lowlifes. We are Yerks, not used car salesmen.
Now, a couple of things here, starting with the most obvious. We are Yerks, not used car salesmen. What a strange thing for a Yerk to say. Visser 3 probably knows very little about used car salesmen because he's a Yerk. He's not actually a human. And you could say, well, maybe he's had a human morph long enough to experience a used car salesman, but he's Victor Trent. He has a mansion. He doesn't need to go to a used car salesman. So why has he got this knowledge of what a used car salesman is like? Second of all, why the comparison? I don't understand the comparison. You made a deal with a human. What are you, a used car salesman? Eh? So the idea is, don't negotiate with inferior beings. Is he trying to say that used car salesmen are superior to people who buy from used car sales? What's the comparison? What a weird thing for him to say on so many levels. But then there's the deeper, bigger issue here. In the book 2, The Visitor, Visser 3 knows of this deal. He actually, and I think I know why, he has a sentimentality towards the host Chapman because of what went on in the Andalite Chronicles. Okay, so Visser 3 was Chapman's controller, and he was the very first human controller. So for whatever reason, I suspect there is a sentimentality here, which is why he has a bit of leniency towards the Chapman host, which is why he made the deal where Chapman said, I will rebel and I will cause you bother if you infest my girl Melissa. To which Visser 3 said, whatever, she's just a girl, I don't care. Have your way, we won't infest her yet. And that was, that seems a relatively good explanation for why these things happen. Here, in the TV series, Visser 3 knows nothing about this deal. So, in his 226, just comes to the Visser and says, we can't infest the girl because I made a deal with my host. Visser 3 of the books wouldn't accept that. He'd be like, sod off, no. No, we're taking her, that's an order. So, the deal isn't as effective. The deal needed to be made initially by Visser 3. Because then what precedent does that set? If any old host can rebel, and every Yerk just said, alright, we won't infest your family if you just stop rebelling, and the Visser 3's got no control of that, then it's just complete incompetence. I mean, we know that the Yerks are incompetent, but even more incompetence. Maybe it is realistic. Whatever the case, it does different from the book, and I think the book got this one right, and the show got this one wrong. And there was no need for the show to get this wrong. They could have written it like it was in the books, surely. And then the big moment where Chapman fights back and takes back the control from the Yerk and attacks Victor Trent. It would have been nice if we'd have seen him, twitch a bit, so it was a bit... because it just sort of smoothly transitions from Yerk in control to Chapman in control. He just sort of goes, no! There's no sort of, no! Or something like that, to make it obvious that there's an inner fight. Instead, it's just almost like the Yerk just gave up control entirely. But there's bigger issues coming up now. The issues are building up. Because remember that Jake and Rachel aren't seeing this conversation. Because they're busy trying to get themselves out of their predicament over that way somewhere. They might be able to see something going on, or maybe hear something, but they're too far away. They aren't getting the little details of what's actually happening here. In the book 2, you had Chapman and Mrs. Chapman, okay? So they put Rachel in a box and they put the carrier down, and that's when Chapman has the twitching and he takes control back from the Yerk. This is why I think Mrs. Chapman was important. Because in the book, we have that scene where they're talking and saying Visser 3 wants to take Melissa to be infested. And that's when both of the Chapmans start to rebel, and you get that scene where they're just sort of rolling around on the floor screaming, you can't do this. And the Chapman parents both agree there. We can't do this. We can't bring Melissa because that's going to get in the way of what we want to do. So we don't get that scene in the TV series. It happens here, where obviously Rachel can't see it, nor Jake. They've tried to do the same stuff, but just shifting everything around. And I do get that, because again, you're restricted by time. And obviously you didn't have the budget to hire a Mrs. Chapman. But it just doesn't work as well. The whole bit with the Chapmans, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Chapman having what is effectively a fit, trying to fight off these Yerks, I think that was very important to how everything played out here. Because Chapman just attacking Victor Trent there, I mean, Melissa's not even there for him to get that emotion. It's not like Melissa is there and he's about to take her off somewhere. No, Melissa isn't even present, so it just doesn't feel as impactful. And you remember when I said Rachel and Jake can't see/hear this conversation? Notice when these controllers run away that Jake is looking in the opposite direction to where they run, so they're clearly not paying attention to what's going on. Now that the controllers are running toward the scene of the incident, Rachel says that it's time for them to make their move and escape the Yerk clutches. Visser 3 then uses the power of grabbing one's face to make sure that Innis 226 can regain control of his host. And of course, Jake, in the matter of, what, maybe 10-20 seconds, is able to pull apart a substantial bit of rope. Great job, controllers. By the way, they've all left, and at this point, Chapman is clearly restrained. So why don't some of you controllers, you know, go back to the Andalites to make sure that this isn't happening? Just a thought. And then, of course, Jake is able to open a cat carrier. How? He just sort of pulls on a bit of rope that they've attached to the door. Look at this. He's just pulling on a bit of lever that's attached to the front of this door thingy. And he's just able to yank it open. Without the box moving. Just think of that. They didn't attach the cat crate down. So he's pulling on this door. But apparently now this box is like bolted into this pillar. And so he's just able to pry open this door. Come on, show. You got to work a bit harder than that. That's a bit silly. Hey again, Lila. You'd be able to get out of that, wouldn't you? After being attacked by his subordinate, Visser 3 decides to just have a memory loss and talk about something else.
Now, as for the Andalites... No!
He just changes the subject again, says, now that I've been attacked, let's talk about the Andalites. And he turns around, and you can see just how... Lila, please, go on the floor. I'm cutting out all these bits, but it's about 20 times in the last 2 minutes she's done this. Just jumped on me, and then jumped on the screen, the keyboard. She doesn't want me to film this for whatever reason, do you? What's up with you? What do you want? You want to rub up against the book? I know you love the book too. Don't stand on the keyboard. You can see just the angle from the perspective here, that they've run off from that direction over there. And they must be, what, 20-30 metres away. So quite far away from eyesight, and nobody's been watching them. But you can imagine that they aren't getting all the details of what's been going on between in this conversation. And they've been busy trying to free themselves, so they don't know what's going on. This is all important information for later on, by the way. Lila, please stop pulling on my lanyard cable. Silly cat. Anyway, what does Visser 3 do upon seeing his greatest foes escaping his clutches?
Bring me the girl.
That's right, he just changes the subject back again. Now for the Andalites. Oh no, they're escaping. Now for the girl. What? It's like inverse priorities. He should have been concentrating on the Andalites. Then he should have been then he focused on the girl. Then he should be focused on Chapman, so he turned his attention to the Andalites. Then he should be attentive to the Andalites, so he turns his focus back to the Chapmans. He's inversing the priorities here. Anyway, he sent a bunch of fumbling, bumbling loonies into the woods to catch these Animorphs and doesn't bother following, doesn't bother even demorphing. He doesn't bother morphing into any big monster like he did in book 2. No, he just turns back and starts talking about Melissa again, because this guy clearly knows his priorities. Also, he doesn't send the Hawk-Bajir after into the woods. No, he doesn't think of that. No, just lets his controllers go at it, and yeah, it's terrible, isn't it? Also, 4 controllers armed with Dracon beams get attacked by Tobias, which allows Jake and Rachel to get away. But Tobias just seems to be attacking one controller and just hanging on to his arm. And he's got his arm raised like that, so Tobias is like up here, and he's just going like that. What are the other 3 controllers doing at this time? They've got weapons around, they've got Dracon beams. Surely one of them just goes bang, bang, and bye-bye birdie. But no, they all just sort of go, ah! And then they fall down into a hole, foiled again. Yeah, it's that sort of thing. And it's just bad, isn't it? It's just bad. Yeah, Tobias is able to deal that. Like when he's in battles in the books, he just sort of swoops in and attacks one control at a time and then flaps away before anything can really happen to him. That's basically his tactic in a battle: to swoop, dive, get out of there, spin, recycle, repeat. But no, here he takes on 4 controllers with Dracon beams and just sort of hangs around biting them, and it's just not. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't. I'm sorry. Then Visser 3 and Chapman continue their conversation and agree the deal that should have been agreed long before this episode happened.
Infesting the girl would only anger my host again. He could jeopardize the secrecy of our mission. And if I may, her small size could be of little use to him.
Enough. You've made your point. All right. The Chapman girl shall remain uninfested for now.
Visser 3, of course, is strikingly lenient, considering he's just been attacked, knocked to the ground twice, and the Andalites have just escaped his clutches. If I were to re-edit this episode, I would move this conversation right to the front. Because that's not Visser 3 after Andalites have escaped his clutches. He's not just going to be sort of, okay, we'll have a deal. Yeah. No, he's going to be... Chapman wouldn't live anymore. It would be like that scene from episode 3 again. Chapman would die again.
You have failed once again.
Not only that, but Jake and Rachel needed to be clued in to what was being said. We're now going to get to the penultimate scene once Rachel and Jake have escaped the Yerks. Remember how Tobias was just dealing with those 4 controllers in the woods? Well, it turns out he wasn't actually in the woods. He was above Visser 3 and Chapman, spying in on their conversation. And then Visser 3 tells his controllers to follow him. You know, the controllers that were supposed to have chased the Andalites? Or did he have more than that and some just stayed with him? And then where do they go? Visser 3 doesn't know that the Andalites are still being chased or that they've gotten away. He just says, follow me. And then they walk off in a nondescript direction to God only knows where to do something. It just... none of these puzzle pieces is fitting together. Jake and Rachel casually walk away from the mansion without a care in the world, even though Visser 3 is probably chasing them by now. Although I do like the added detail of Jake still having that bit of rope around his neck. During this walk, Rachel says...
Wow. Melissa's dad went through all that to protect her.
Yeah.
How do you know? What have you seen? What have you actually seen, Rachel? You didn't go comfort Melissa. You didn't see Chapman and Mrs. Chapman say, we can't take the girl because it's causing our host to... da-da-da-da-da. You didn't see the part in the book where the Yerk deliberately drops control and allows Chapman to get all emotional in front of Visser 3 and say, leave my daughter alone, that sort of stuff. You didn't see any of that. Remember, you were about 20-30 metres away when the whole conversation between Visser 3 and Chapman went down and you were busy trying to get yourselves free. You didn't see anything of what Chapman said. This is where the TV series has clearly just thought, oh, just use the book plot line, without actually doing the work in the TV series to reach that point. These 2 characters have no idea what went down. They've got no idea that there's a deal between Visser 3 and Chapman to keep Melissa safe. They don't even know if Melissa is safe, which makes this line so silly.
Sounds like she's gonna be okay.
In the book, Rachel sees everything. She's in the cat box and she's listening to all these conversations, and it lays out perfectly what has been going on. You don't get that in the TV series. The only explanation for why these two are now walking down the street saying, oh, that deal Chapman made, oh, it means Melissa's safe. The only way that that's possible is at the end there where Tobias was peeking down at Visser 3 and Chapman down there. But we don't, at no point do we see Tobias coming up to them saying, hey, everyone, by the way, Chapman made a deal and all that sort of stuff. No, we don't get that. I think that's maybe implied by the fact that he's watching over that conversation, but it's really not made clear. And it's just not as effective. It's nowhere near as effective. Plus, Tobias was just in the woods tackling the controllers, so he can't have seen everything that went on. I mean, what did he see? We only saw that he was there at the last bit. It's just a mess, honestly. It's a mess. And a lot of it would just be sort of solved if you just took the major portions of the latter half of this episode and moved portions around, because it's all in the wrong order. Which is why it just seems weird that Visser 3 is constantly saying, now about the Andalites, now about the girl, now about the Andalites, now about you, Chapman. It needs to be reordered, and I've said this before, I might just go through the series in the future, obviously when I've got a bit more time, and yeah, I might just go through all these episodes and just do a little bit of tweaking here and there to see if I can make it better. And I know what I'd do with this episode. I would front load all those conversation bits, front load it so it looks like it all happens before the Andalites escape, and it all happens before they get put to one side and make their escape. So that Jake and Rachel are able to hear this whole conversation, and then they escape. And Visser 3 isn't sort of just looking around saying, oh, now let's talk about the girl again. It's like they messed up the order of what goes down. That's basically what it comes down to. And then we have the best part of the episode where Rachel says, I hope I didn't make you mad. And Jake says, no, not at all.
I'm sorry I got you guys into this mess. It's my fault and I don't blame you if you're mad.
Mad? I'm not mad. Tobias, are you mad?
I'm impressed.
This isn't how it should be. This is book 37 levels of cringe. I mean, remember in book 37 where Rachel's actions led to the death of some guy, and she's at this kid's funeral, and she's just sort of like, well, he wanted the guy's money anyway, so it was fine that he got killed. And Jake just comes up to her and says, yeah, you did a good job. Yeah, you might have almost gotten everyone killed and destroyed several buildings and gotten someone killed, but yeah, you did fine. That's the book 37 level, and we've just seen that there. Because in the book, Rachel got a bollocking from Jake at various points for her disobedience. This time she just goes, sorry, Jake, and he's like, it's okay, it's all good. That's book 37 levels of bad. Okay, maybe she didn't get anyone killed, so it's not as bad as book 37, but it's along those lines. But it just goes to show that these characters aren't the actual characters. At no point has Jake turned around and showed that he's the leader. He hasn't stamped his authority on anything. At the start he said, we need a plan. So Rachel just goes and does her thing anyway, which to be fair she does in the books. But at no point does Jake take control of the situation like he tries to do in the books. To a limited degree of success, but at least he tried. Here he's just such a pushover. There's no character there. He's just there. That's all he's doing. He's just being there. And then Rachel, going saying, oh, I'm sorry. That's not Rachel's character either. As like I said earlier, this might as well be Cassian Marco standing here now. Honestly. And this is the major failing, I think, of the episode. Now, for full context, this is one of the better episodes of the series. It nails down a lot of stuff. The introduction of Eugene Lipinski as himself, Victor Trent, was brilliant. His acting, fantastic. Some of the tone, some of the intimidation factor was definitely there that it didn't have in the rest of the series. And a lot of the scenes were good to great. I mean, the barn scene had its issues, but largely it was pretty good. This is, for the TV show standards, a good episode. But the character's not there. And a lot of it should have come here, because book 2 is where we get a lot of that character being developed. That's what book 2 is largely about. The scene where Rachel disobeys Jake, shows her impulsive side to go and comfort Melissa, who's in tears on the bed. We don't get that here. Sure, she showed a little bit of being impulsive by disobeying him at the start, which should have been his opportunity to put his impact on the show, but he doesn't. And then it's all made... I mean, yeah, Rachel showed her impulsive side, but in the end she apologised. And she just said sorry and sort of laughed at... yeah, it just doesn't... It's not right. The characters are mockeries of their book counterparts. I mean, just look at Rachel's aesthetic. In the book, she is Miss Fashion. They're always talking about how she wears these designer clothes and she always looks great and she's shopaholic and she's got this attitude. She's sassy. You know, you look at her and you think, oh, she's like a blonde bimbo. But if you talk to her, you know that, you got to stand back. There's none of this with this character. I mean, look at her clothes. I mean, obviously, back in the 90s, fashion was different. But I'm looking at these clothes and I'm just thinking, is that, like, top fashion?
How's your dad?
It looks very grey and very bland. I mean, what is this? Like, it's just rubbish. I'm sorry to say. And there's no fuss made about it at all. She's just tepid. She's tepid. And she's basically Cassie 2.0, or Cassie is Rachel 2.0, hence Cassachely, or Rassie, I think we like to call her now, Ratchy. Yeah, it's just not Rachel. It's not, it's an impersonator. I mean, she looks like she could be a Rachel, but she needs that grit. She needs that attitude. She needs to say, nah, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do what I want to do, and you're not going to stop me. We need a bit of that. We need the sass. But we don't, we just get, sorry, ha ha ha. That's not Rachel. I'm sorry, but TV series, that's not Rachel. This episode, as much as it had its great moments, this was the opportunity to actually install a character. And it didn't happen. There was a lot cut from the book to make this episode, and that is, understandable. They've got to fit it all into 20 minutes. But they spent so much time beating around the bush where they could have made those impactful scenes and just put them in there. It wouldn't take too much effort to do a scene of Melissa crying and talking to her cat and the cat just listening. All you needed was Melissa's character to lie in the bed, pretend to cry, or just look, if she can't do a crying out, just make her look really upset and just have her talking to a cat. That's all you needed. And that cat would be Rachel, and you get so much context. And then just before Chapman leaves the house, have him do a couple of twitches and fall to the ground. And see, this is why we needed Mrs. Chapman, because that, without Mrs. Chapman there, that scene wouldn't have worked, because he's got no one to talk to give you that exposition that's needed at that point. So he didn't get that. So Mrs. Chapman was actually necessary at that point, so that Rachel hears that conversation and knows what's going on. I think what should have happened in hindsight, episode 4, On the Run, the one where they're chasing the disc down, make that Between Friends Part 1, or The Visitor Part 1, and then make this a Part 2. So you've got 40 minutes to fit all that extra stuff in and really build that character. Give Rachel the character building she needs. Make sure that they know all about the thing we're going on with Chapman. Just fill all those little plot holes and make it work. Because On the Run was a filler episode, let's be honest. And you already had a bit of Melissa going on in there. So just make that one more convincing. Do a better job with that. Because honestly, the Andalite disc can sod off. It really can. But anyway, where does this episode rank of the top 5, the 5 we've done so far? It's better than On the Run. For all its flaws, on a surface level, it's entertaining. And it's largely good. The intimidation factor of Vista 3 really propels this episode. Once you dig deep, it really screwed up Rachel's character. It didn't screw it up, it just didn't give it. And this is where we needed that Rachel character to come in. And for whatever reason, Brooke Nevin looks like a Rachel, but she... And this is the same with the narrator in the audiobooks as well, so it's not just a Brooke Nevin problem. But for whatever reason, Every type of media that isn't the books just refuses to give Rachel the character she needed. I'm Rachel, and I'm going to do that way, and I want to do it that way. Shut up, Jay, you're not the boss of me. Where's that Rachel? Why do we never get that Rachel? Are we not allowed to see, you know, a girl acting that way? I mean, I'm not a feminist or anything, and the whole girl power in movies is a bit annoying recently, where they're always right and they always win fights. Yeah, that's a bit much, but there is a middle ground there somewhere. You don't want all girls just to be ha 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 ha, because that's just, to a degree, it's misogynistic, which is bad. You need the middle ground. You need the bit in the middle. But we never get it. We get that extreme or that extreme. Rachel is the one sort of verging on 2/3 of the way up that spectrum, but we're not allowed that. It's one or the other. It's that extreme or that extreme. And so Rachel becomes that extreme, where it's just, ha ha ha, I'm Rachel, sorry, I'm Rachel, sorry for showing my impulsiveness, sorry. That's not Rachel. Rachel is, no, what are you on about? I want to do that. Hey, you going to go shopping? That's Rachel. I want Rachel, Brooke. Bring me Rachel. You will give me Rachel, I will break your shins. That's what Rachel would say. That's what Rachel would say. Not, could you give me Rachel, please? Whatever, I've rattled on long enough. This episode is pretty good, but it drops the ball in a major way, if you dig beneath the surface, which is a shame. It's not as bad as On the Run, or episode 3 or episode 2. So, episodes 1 and 5 are the best of the bunch so far. Episode 1 is the best. Of all of them so far, episode 1 is definitely the best. But we'll see what comes next. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed experiencing this episode with me, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with something I've said? Do you disagree with something I've said? Please do let me know. And I hope you join me for the next one, whenever that one comes around. So thank you very much, and I shall see you somewhere else in the Animorphs universe. Ta-da!